Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Casual Coders Podcast, Season 2. I'll be your host today, Ian. Joining me are Alex, our resident trash collector. We've got Quentin, our resident fire alarm expert. And we've got Kyle, our resident AI fanatic.
Hello.
All right, let's get right into it. First topic is skimmers. Am I right?
Skimmers.
I'm going to skim your credit cards. And
What is a skimmer?
Data. What is a skimmer?
Yeah, what is a skimmer?
That's a really great question. That's a little plastic piece, some electronical device of some form. You commonly see them in like gas stations and other point of sales terminals. And all it does is it reads your credit card when you swipe it, and it sends that data back, or realistically it stores it on device so that some person can come back later, collect it, and then use your credit card somewhere else.
Identity thief.
Yeah.
But they come in very creative form factors. Like there have been a couple that I've seen. Like I took like a little training on skimmers and like where they are in the world. If you go up to a gas pump, some people like make a full-on copy of the entire gas pump and place it over the gas pump, because in skimmer training they'll say, oh, whenever you're trying to go put in your car like for a mag stripe reader, you want to shake pull on it. But if it's the size of the entire gas pump, even if you do, it's not going to budge. So
how funny would that be though? You walk up to the gas pump, you shake it around, and the whole faceplate rolls off the thing. It's like this massive, I don't know, how tall's a gas pump? Like 5 foot by 3 foot sheet of plastic, and you're standing there like, did I break something? What's going on here?
yeah, I would probably set it down and drive away to a different gas station at that point.
You know, there was a social media craze some time ago where they were like, you know, look at what they can do. They just put this shell right over the credit card reader and they get all your information. And to this day, it's been like 10 years since I've seen it. I still go up to every single credit card reader that's a self-service station and I like inspect it closely.
You should. You absolutely should.
Yeah, I think my dad just got his credit card stolen, so I'm like, ooh, you never know when it's going to happen.
I'll admit I've never done it and I've never had issues.
Well,
Really? Okay.
I mean, I occasionally, if one looks really sketchy, I'll like wiggle it, but
Since that training, I was like, I didn't realize. And now I wiggle it every single time.
Yep.
I mean, it's fair. It's fair.
If it's a credit card that gets stolen, though, you can at least call your credit card company and like,
Yeah,
charge it back. But
that's true. Debit cards would make that
if you
a big challenge.
correct, because even if you call your debit card company and ask for it back, they'll be like, no, you spent the money.
Yeah, no guarantees with a debit card.
So.
And you could probably skim other stuff too, right? It's not just credit cards. Like, what's
mean,
the other dangers?
anything. RFID tags, HID badges to badge into work are really easy to skim because it's all one big standard. So you can set up a weaponized reader to just read them from 6 foot away as people just walk past.
Because related to the power output, if I recall, like I've seen like a 1 foot by 1 foot reader that someone was like wearing as a satchel, and they put a ton of power into it, and they could be like, the distance between Alex and I right now, which is like 6 feet, and it would still read as you're walking by, which I think is crazy.
That is kind of spooky.
Which is also a way of skimming.
That's why they have like RFID protected wallets now.
Right, the Faraday cages. I've seen them. That's always like a selling point. Is it's a metal cage, so it keeps all the wireless signals out. But
it keeps the 5G out.
Yeah, right. The one time that actually makes sense. It's not just a scam.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, the other place is going into a gas station and like how you have the keypad that you type into, 1 through 9 and the 0, and then you like put it in either on the bottom or you swipe it. Those I've also seen as the entire module basically on top of it.
Well, yeah, because I imagine if you're skimming like a debit card or something, you also need to know the PIN with that. And so if you can also take the PIN with some form of keypad that steals that input as well, you're better off for it.
A way that it used to be done was they would have the actual skimmer on the inside where the card goes, and then they'd have a camera pointing down at the pin, and they would just sync up the time when the card was ran with the camera.
Yeah, I've seen that in gas pumps too.
Yep.
So that way, with your even with just a camera, they can quote unquote skim you using just the camera feed because you have your credit card in your hand and you go to put it in, and they see the credit card, and then they see you type in your PIN. So they have everything that they need.
That's fair. So what? They just take a GoPro and they suction cup it to the roof of the gas pump or the gas station
with a nice lens on it to scope in.
The ones that I've seen are like the ones like the Google Glass.
Oh,
so that's a callback.
Yeah,
right.
That's technology's ancient at this point.
Yeah.
Where it's like that thin.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just
like a millimeter?
Yeah, it's just like mounted.
Just anything you look at, you can record it or what?
Oh, so it's like a super thin camera that physically goes inside the pump?
Yeah, facing, usually it's up towards the top of the display where it's covering the screen.
Oh, I
then
see.
pointing down.
And then it's pointing down. It's on the outside, though. I don't know why my brain went, oh, yeah, they put it inside the slot that the card goes into, but that doesn't make any sense because that slot is like a black piece of plastic that covers up both sides of the card, I imagine.
Which one more modern way of counteracting skimming is there's like a whole bunch of infrared sensors on the inside of the actual card reader now. So one way that we were taught to, I used to work on ATMs, to verify that it was functional was we would just put like a rag on the inside and just let it sit there, and it usually would wait about 3-4 minutes, and then it would just
It would, like,
it
trip
would
and-
it would trip, and you couldn't use the ATM until somebody came back and reset it.
So it like locks it up. Interesting. So is that just to prevent people from tampering with it?
Yep.
I mean, it's a
Okay.
good anti-tamper prevention.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess an ATM is sort of one of those things you want that on and not, I don't know, just let a bunch of people show up and bust open your ATM and steal stuff. I know they're usually bolted like really strongly into the ground with
Yeah.
huge lag bolts and
But people will still pull up a truck.
Yep.
And, you know,
and
with
they'll
the
try,
chains.
and it's funny.
Sometimes they succeed, though.
Yeah, absolutely. There's only so
Yeah.
much you can do.
They have these paint cartridges inside of ATM machines that will shoot all of the cash that's in there with this red paint.
I imagine he's the person for that, yeah?
Yeah, I can't really talk much about this.
No comment.
But die packs is what they're called. And they're not really commonly used anymore. But whenever you would they would hand you the bills, they're GPS tracked. So once you get close to the door of the bank or wherever it is, it explodes and completely dyes the money red. So that way, even if you got a dollar bill that has a little speck of red or is just lightly covered, you know, hey, this bill was stolen, shouldn't be used.
I mean,
So that's why they launder money.
Yeah.
It's my understanding that a lot of the bills that go into ATMs are logged by their serial numbers too, so they know every bill that's inside that box, and they can just trace it back that way. So when the bank gets it, they see it and they're like, "Oh, this dollar was stolen."
That is true. Every dollar bill has a serial number on it and a serial year, I guess, like a series year, and they're all unique. Every single one of them.
Someone I saw had an app where you could type in what your serial number was, and anyone else who used the app, like, you could see where the dollar bill
Yep.
had been over his entire lifetime.
Yeah, there's a website called
That's
Where's
pretty cool.
George that does that.
Where's
so you
George?
can,
That was
you can
called?
type in your serial number and see other people that have checked it in. That was really popular back in the early 2000s, but people still do it. It's kind
I
of
think
fun.
I've seen it sharpied on a couple of bills.
Yeah.
The website URL
They
for
make
where you
stamps.
track them. Oh, do they?
Yep, you just stamp your bills and check them in.
That's really
That's funny. Make an automated system for it, so you like get a bunch of cash or something, and it just automatically stamps them and logs them. And
Not
yeah.
sure why, but you can do it.
I remember like some of those, you would be shocked how far they go in such a short period of time.
Yeah.
Within the course of like a week, it can go all across the United States.
Oh, I
Ridiculous.
bet, yeah. I don't know. Throw it in a little envelope and mail it across the states, right?
True,
Here you
true.
go. I got this bill for you to my friend.
Even your cash isn't safe. It can be tracked.
Yeah.
I'm gonna jump
You-
back to Skimmers though, unless you want to.
Oh yeah, I had actually another thing about Skimmers too.
Well, I'm curious because tap to pay is cryptographically secure, right? Because it's private key, public key. The private key is stored on the card, if I understand correctly, and then that hits some banking server somewhere, and then it pings back a yeah, exactly. It
Simply
pings,
magic.
up in the cloud.
Yeah. It pings back a query or something that the card has to solve, a question, essentially. And then the card uses its key to encrypt that and then sends it back one more time, and that validates the transaction. So I imagine that's much more difficult to skim because of that private key, public key. It's sort of why you can't clone a tap-to-pay card, as far as I'm aware, without,
The-
you know,
I think-
a lot of struggle.
I think the definition of skimming is that you'll have the detailed information so that way you can use it again later. But there's like another thing that you can do where if you have one of Square devices and you were to put it in between where you're trying to actually do the tap to pay and the Square activates, when you go to tap to pay, it'll capture that one transaction and
I
can
guess
charge you
that's
something.
true. You could, yeah.
But then the other transaction won't go through still, right? So it can
But
like
you'd know immediately at that point.
exactly, and you'll see what the heck it charged me, but it didn't do anything. So it'll be investigated at least.
Unless they're doing some weird thing where they charge you a bunch of money and then find a way to then insert that money back in through a different card into the pump so that the pump accepts a card, although it lags a little bit. So they've captured your card and they've charged you $500.
Oh my gosh, and they use
And
a
then they
different card to
put
do it.
$100 on the
Wow,
pump
that's
with a different
genius.
card.
Oh
Have I
my
just
goodness.
invented a new method of skimming?
Yeah, that's genius.
I'm gonna skim your cards.
With the Magstripe readers, when they skim those though, because it's
Well,
just
Magstripe is super insecure.
but why? What makes Magstripe insecure?
It's just the funny numbers on your credit card in a little magnetic stripe. It's just the plain text. It's stored. It's super easy to read. You can brute force it. I mean,
there are devices that you can use that to read Magstripe, which basically, you
yeah,
run
you
that-
swipe it and it spits it out into a notepad. Here's your name. I think there's address maybe in there. There's the numbers on the card, expiration date, and I think the 3 funny digits on the back, which you should totally give me in the comments below.
Yeah, right. Now that makes me just want to get like a Magstripe module because I've always wanted to just see what's on
Honestly,
my card.
I've sort of always wanted to buy one too,
Wouldn't that
but
be
I've
fun?
never had an excuse to get one.
Right. They're like $50 or something. I mean, they're not.
I mean, I bet you could get one cheaper, right? An auction or some sale. Just buy it
China.
used on eBay.
Yep,
Yeah,
yep.
or China.
It'd be interesting to see.
But because like the Magstripe, as it's going across the reader, it's just reading the magnet. If two devices are reading it, both devices will have it. So
Sure.
they'll get it, and it'll look like it goes through. So there'd be no way for you to detect that it was stolen.
Right.
Exactly, which is why it's less secure, right? Because with the chip cards, the one transaction is cryptographically secure, but most, if not all cards, still have a mag stripe on them.
Right.
So
Correct.
you would just read the mag stripe to skim it, and then the payment would also go through with the actual payment provider because it's using the chip to authenticate that, but you still have their credit card number and the 3 funny digits on the back and all that information pulled from that mag stripe.
It's always been so complicated in the US. I feel like they wanted to make chips the way to go for a really long time. Tap to pay would always get rejected on all my cards because they wouldn't accept it at retailers. Or I'd swipe my card and they're like, no, you have to insert the chip. But now I've noted tap to pay just works on all my cards now. What happened?
I think it finally became standardized.
Yeah, they're trying to get it to become the industry standard moving forward, but right now still only 40% of all transactions are done with tap to pay.
Okay.
And so they can't move it completely over yet.
You can't phase it out, right?
I mean,
Right.
there are some people out there who disable the tap to pay. I've seen people take a drill bit and they literally punch a small hole in the card to cut the
Do
antenna.
not do this.
And what I've been told is that it's because they do a lot of RFID stuff. So they're always having a phone that reads RFID cards naturally and whatever. And then that will read their credit cards too. And they don't want that garbage data, I guess, cluttering whatever they're trying to read with their phone. It's like a physical penetration testing sort of thing. So they just cut the antenna off the card so that the card becomes inert, at least for tap to pay. I'm pretty sure the chip still works. You can insert it.
I guess that
and
makes sense.
obviously you can slide it for the mag stripe. But I'm not sure mag stripe even works in retailers anymore, which is sort of interesting.
Use it.
There's so
I think
it-
I've seen it occasionally, but it's much more like I feel like I've taken a card and swiped it, and the machine's like, "No, you got to insert the card."
Right.
Yeah,
so-
but if you try, and then it'll tell you to go back, though. It's a fallback mechanism, but you're not supposed to use the primary.
So for the most part, if your chip fails to read your chip a few times, then it tells you to use the mag stripe. There's only a few retailers anymore that don't accept tap to pay, and that's Walmart. That's because they have their own Walmart Pay.
Oh, really?
And
Well,
then
Walmart accepts tap to pay.
No,
No,
they
they
require you to
don't. Never
download their app, and then you like register your
no.
cards in their app, and then you like go with Walmart Pay and you tap. It just they want a
Unacceptable.
piece of the pie.
Yeah, unacceptable.
Yeah, that's the new When Pigs Fly. When Ian finally downloads the Walmart app.
I would never download the Walmart
Exactly.
app.
It'll never happen.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
Home Depot is another one.
Huh.
Lowe's is another one.
I'm gonna have to go back out to these stores and try to tap my card on the
Yeah,
thing.
I never noticed that.
I thought it
And,
worked, but maybe I'm wrong.
There's a ton, and then obviously mom and pop shops.
Well, even
Yeah.
then, so many of them are using Square and Clover and everything, and they have all that built in their device, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't those companies take a huge cut too, though?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, between the whole routing of credit cards is really interesting to me because at the end of the day, like, you've heard like Visa and MasterCard, right? Those are the two companies that got together and made like the credit card specification
Yeah.
that exists. And then also at the end of the day, those companies need to go to your bank. So every single one of your banks have to talk to the Visa or MasterCard corporations, and then those each talk to different credit card processors along the way. And certain credit card processors are easier to use or provide different features. And so sometimes between like a physical device that actually is doing the reading, for example, Square, right? Square has its own credit card processing organization that it uses, which often goes to a couple more, and then eventually gets to the Visa/MasterCard people, corporations, which then go to the banks, which then they say, yes, this is good to go. You have enough money to make this transaction, or no, rejection. And then it goes all the way back to the stack. And if you can get a slice of that pie, every hop can like have their own little tax on it. And if you can like get 1% of any sale that goes through,
And then you do a whole bunch of sales.
Yep.
that's basically a tax on all money that goes through. That's crazy. That's a huge amount of money. So
I think we need to start implementing our own payment processor system. It could be like casual pay or something. I don't know. And then
Open source credit card.
Open source credit card. It takes a 10% cut. I think it's genius.
all right, I found my notes. So
24% APR.
Oh my
Yeah, there you go.
Only 24. I think it's 52%.
Pre-approved.
Yeah, there you go.
So yeah, the name of the corporation that handles all that is it's PCI certifications.
Okay.
And in particular, they have two different certifications. There's one called PA-DSS, which is a PCI certification to be able to store magstripe data, credit card numbers, names, etc. And then there's the new one, which is SSF, or Secure Software Framework. So it's the PCI certification related to EMV, which is tap-to-pay type stuff. And there's also tap-to-pay, where it's, magnetic coil that energizes the chip that exists inside of your credit card. If you pull out your credit card right now, there's a little chip in it.
Right. That's the, I don't know, core function of how it works. There's a little antenna on the reader, and it bounces at a certain frequency. And then when you take the card and you put it on that reader, those two magnetically couple together. And then it reads, I think it's voltage deviation or some similar deviation in that coil. And depending on how that wiggles, it pulls data out of that, ones and zeros, and converts that into the digital signal to charge the card and pull the data off it that it needs to run the cryptography and then perform the transaction.
Yeah, with one additional step that I'd say that you didn't mention, which is that when the coil is energized, there's a little chip that exists inside of your credit card that gets energized and generates said ones and zeros.
Correct, yeah. That chip gets power from the magnetic field, and then it,
Yeah, it's not
runs
just
the
ones and zeros that
transaction.
exist in the card like magstripe.
Yeah,
So-
It's like
that is true,
wireless
right?
charging, right? It basically, with a proximity, charges the chip so that it can run.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just super low power compared to wireless charging.
Right, but also in comparison to RFID, where it's normally the chip, quote unquote, that it reads the numbers from is just like a text file. Basically.
Oh, yeah. It's just like
that's
ROM, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. You can flash whatever you want to that. It's just a collection of literally words. It's like 7 on the chip in my hand is 7 32-bit words, I think. So you can just put data into those however you want.
But the other way that you use a credit card is by like inserting it, right? Not the magstripe, but the insertion, which then it also reads the chip, but in a different way.
Right, it
Very
just
similar-
directly couples to it with contacts. It's just a direct electrical connection. I think it's very similar to the wireless, but
But if you look
it's
at the
just
card,
a direct connection as opposed to a wireless connection to it.
yeah, if you pull out your credit card right now and you look at that little chip are those, it's a silver color. Those are the metal contacts that it touches.
Right, and that's not
That's
even
so
the
cool.
chip. That is just the metal contacts on the card. The chip is buried somewhere deep. I mean, it's tiny. It's like a millimeter by a millimeter or smaller. It's the ridiculously microscopic little thing.
It's awesome. So then that's where they use a SSF secure software framework specification. So they're trying to go away from, to my knowledge, PADSS, and this is again only to my knowledge. So this information, your mileage may vary, to the SSF stuff. But you know how I said like there's a bunch of different processors that are in the stack. In order to get these certifications, for example, a PADSS or SSF certification, like if we want to make our own casual pay, is really frustrating to get that certification and very expensive and time consuming.
I believe that.
I imagine so, yeah.
So instead what you can do is you can go to another company that already has that certification done for you, and like, you use
I mean, they
them
charge
as
you a bit, but
they do.
yeah.
But then
there
you
we
use
go.
them as an API, and then you never have to handle anything. I think they'll like give you a token that's associated with your merchant ID and actually doing.
I
said
have to
transactions.
imagine that's what VivoKey does. I don't know if you're familiar with VivoKey, but they're
I'm
doing
not.
rings and subdermal flex implants that perform the cryptography and actually let you put a credit card on it. It has a weird like phone app and some API stuff where it does API calls and authenticates transactions. I feel like the ring would be cool because then you could literally just have a credit card on your hand at all times.
What?
I mean, I almost think it would be an interesting project.
You had me at subdermal implants. What is the point of implanting a credit card into your hand?
You'd never forget your credit card.
It's so much easier to steal. You can't even put it in a little box.
You're gonna wear a metal glove all the time.
Oh, man. I'm not
Well,
interested.
they're
I will
lower-
not be on the wait list.
They're lower power than the full card, though, because it's such a smaller antenna. It's harder to couple to,
Okay.
right?
So
like,
harder
have
to
you tried to
use.
scan the contact card that's in my hand?
No.
It's
Fun
a
fact: he has a
pain.
contact card in his hand.
Yes, he does,
Yeah.
but it's not a credit card.
No, it's not. But it's a pain to scan that little thing. It takes forever, and you really
Yeah.
got to line up the phone right.
Huh.
And it's way faster to enter buildings with because it's a lower frequency. But the credit cards are 1335 megahertz, so they're the higher frequency.
Okay.
So, I mean, the skin alone is going to attenuate that signal
Yeah,
fairly
that's a good
heavily.
point.
But my thought was we could make a ring, right? I just go to my bank, I say, hey, I lost my credit card, give me another one. They give me that credit card. I think you can dissolve the credit card in acetone then. And then you pull out the guts and the antenna and all the internals, and you just cast that into like a resin ring or something, and you just put
Put
that
it on.
And
Now, this sounds like a fun project.
I feel like it's a fun project.
Yeah,
I think
that's
we should
kinda
try it
cool.
at some point.
If nothing else, I just want to dissolve a credit card.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, there's a couple videos on YouTube also for those of you watching. I would recommend watching one of the dissolving videos. So cool.
I've got some spare T5577 cards, which are super common. It's like an emulator chip. It emulates like HID-procs and all sorts of other things. I think it's EM410, all sorts of cards. You can flash it with whatever data and get you into all sorts of buildings.
Is that what we played with when we were scanning your hand and trying to scan my credit card?
We played with the Proxmark.
Is that what that was?
Yeah.
Okay. I was
You never
What is
checked
the
your cat, did
Proxmark?
you? The Proxmark is like open source hardware that's designed around RFID hacking and interfacing. It's really a exploration tool, I suppose. it'll read just about everything. It does high frequency and low frequency cards. Low frequency cards are associated with access control systems most commonly. HID procs, like I mentioned, EM410. There's a whole bunch. I don't have the list in my brain, but I mean, you run Proxmark 3 software and you type LF and it shows you the huge list. It's like 18 different protocols. Same with high frequency. There's like 18 different high frequency protocols. Most common ones like MIFARE Classic. It's literally just a kilobyte of storage embedded in the card, and you can put a bunch of data on that however you want. You can run checksums and like CRC. You can validate the data, make sure it's a data integrity thing to make sure a bit hasn't flipped in the card and to make sure that someone hasn't messed with it. I mean, there was a full DEF CON talk that I went to where the kids, they were literally high schoolers. They hacked the Boston Metro system, which was using a MIFARE Classic 1K card, and they changed the data on that card, and they reverse engineered the checksum and updated the checksum to the point where they literally had a little device. They could go buy a card for 25 cents, and then they'd scan the card on their device, and it would have $374 on it.
Oh.
Or whatever. It's not 374. It's the integer limit, 32-bit integer limit of money.
Yeah, it's really
on
interesting
card.
that they
Or
store the
16.
money that you have on the card versus like just giving you an ID and then storing how much money you have in a database somewhere.
It's like antiquated, right? Trust the card, obviously, and don't run a central database to check against. The card's accurate enough, and then
Need to see
someone
how
goes
secure it is.
around and, replaces the currency on their card and fixes it, and then they realize, oh, we got to update this to actually hit a central database, too.
I wonder if when they
Figure it
did
out.
that, when like
I wonder if you could enumerate those IDs now.
probably, I mean they probably took that system out of place now.
would
I
hope so.
imagine.
There was a whole
talk at
responsible
DEF CON.
disclosure thing that the school did and the students did, I recall correct.
I wonder if they had to pay taxes on the money that they didn't have that was spent. Like if I bought this for 25 cents and I put $375 on it and I used $375 worth, like according to the company, they got $375 worth of income, so they have to pay money, like pay that in
Well,
taxes.
the company doesn't know. It only allows and gives a ticket, right? And subtracts a value off of that card. So they paid for the cost of the ticket, which I imagine
Oh, you're
is
right.
less than...
They would only do it when you're buying the card physically.
And I'm not sure they ever even took the rides with the tickets. So I don't know how that works. Like if I steal a ticket but I never use it for anything, did I really steal the service? I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on their back end as well. Like, does that remove a seat from the airplane, or does that still get filled with a different person who buys a different ticket?
Yeah, this was a metro, so it's like as many people as can come on. I'm pretty sure.
Right. So
They
then
were
I
gonna
imagine
balance
it's
it.
zero lost revenue.
True. So
That still doesn't excuse a lazy programming method of just putting money on a card, though.
It's such an old thing, though, right? I mean, you see
Yeah.
it all the time in production systems. Oh man, yeah, this thing still runs COBOL.
yeah,
Oh,
all of our
no.
banking software pretty much.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's all antiquated, and it was done in the 90s. And
That's
then,
how manufacturer coupons used to be too, though. It would just the barcode itself would code in like the discount on products, so people would
Really?
make like fake coupons where you could get like it's a buy one get one Xbox 360, and you could just fudge the barcode, and people would do that. Like that was a big thing like 10 years ago.
I had no idea. That makes
Yeah.
so much sense that they would do that.
It feels like it's so easy nowadays with all the apps that just read and scan
Yeah.
barcodes and spit out all the data and information for them. You can do the
Things
same
hackers
with
do
QR
for
codes.
us.
Download barcode reader app on your phone right now.
Yeah,
Yep.
Binary Eye is great. I love it.
I'd
Binary-
like to
Is
think
Is that
they
an open
patched
source
it,
software
but-
of some kind?
Yeah, it's on F-Droid at least. It reads barcodes, it reads QR codes. I've literally used it to scan my boarding passes for planes, and I regenerate the QR code on the boarding pass as a vector image, as an SVG, and then
It's
I
just taking
just
a
have
screenshot?
that on my phone. So I can scan it, and I can zoom in on it. I can do whatever I want. I don't have to like screenshot the boarding pass or anything
Nice
like
high
that. I
quality.
just pull the data out of it and make it high quality. Yeah.
That is crazy. Like, do they have that also available on like iOS as well as Android? Do you know?
You
Or-
would have to look. I don't know, right?
Me as an Apple boy.
I'm the weird, yeah.
Come on, that's the beauty of
Deep
open source. You could just
Yeah,
port your
just-
own.
Yeah, might
Yeah,
as well. Just
exactly.
Good luck.
I mean, good luck. You can pay the $100 a month or a year for the Apple App Store or whatever ability.
Oh, yeah,
to-
never mind.
I think
Yeah.
that's one of the coolest parts about open source software is that you can just pull it out like, and use it / integrate it with anything pretty much. If you want to make your own software packages, boop, grab from one, grab from another. It's like here's a question: what is your guys' like favorite open source software that you guys use?
Where to begin?
Yeah,
There's
where,
so
where
many.
to begin? I mean, I guess the one that I use most often is obviously Linux and KDE because that's what my desktop runs. So, I mean, that whole subsystem is open source, kernel,
OS.
operating system,
All components.
all components,
Lib-read
the
line,
bootloader,
double conversion.
grub, yeah, and I don't know, everything. And then, of course, with that, you get the suite of KDE applications and programs, and all that stuff's open source as well. So you get Firefox, a web browser, Dolphin as a file explorer, They have a video editor, like photo viewers, GwenView. Liza is the music player.
Oh, I've heard of that.
I mean, obviously there's GIMP. GIMP is great.
I love GIMP. I use it so much. For
Yeah.
me, my journey with GIMP started when I used, let's say, a questionable download of Photoshop for a long time. Just because, I was a kid. I couldn't afford a $1,500 software package or whatever.
It's always ethical to pirate Adobe products.
Honestly, it really is. But you didn't hear that from me. You heard it from Ian first. So the feds can go to his address. But, I mean, seriously, when you think about it, like, if you're a creative person, if you try to make your own, whatever it is, videos or photos or any of that, if you're just a hobbyist and you're not making money, often the Adobe Suite products are really not in your grasp. I mean, you can't afford them. I mean, they're prohibitively expensive.
You don't have $50 a month to pay for your Adobe subscription for a thing that you use like once a month?
When they moved it to a subscription, that made it even worse, because it's like if you're a freelancer and you go, let's say, 6 months out of the year without even working on something, you still have to pay for it. And
they have a monthly option, I guess, so you can unsubscribe during that.
I guess,
time.
but
so you pay $50 to use it one time for a month, and then you retire your subscription and then pay $50 again to use this piece of software 3 months later for one.
It's better than $1,500, right?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't know.
Then let's jump to like Autodesk Inventor, right?
Oh,
Their
no.
subscription is $2,000 a year for a piece of
think that's
software that I
ridiculous.
use, I don't know, 3 times a year, 4 times a year,
Right.
every once in a while, like very, very infrequently. It's not worth it to me. I don't know. Blender or FreeCAD, Onsel just released. That's pretty cool. But
I just hate
with
software
GIMP.
rental. I think if you don't own it, that's a problem. So the beauty of
I agree.
open source software for me was not only replacing all those expensive subscriptions and software packages, but it's like, Office, Microsoft Office, it costs money. You used to be able to just buy it off the shelf if you could afford it, maybe $100, $150, which is still a lot. But now LibreOffice, OpenOffice, you can get all sorts of open source software that does the same exact thing. They can open all the document files. Why would you not use it? I've been using it forever. I switched all over to GIMP and DaVinci Resolve. I don't know if that's open source, but it's free. It's not open source, so I won't talk about that. But I switched all to free software, and most of it's open source, and I have never looked back. I love GIMP. I use GIMP all the time now. I never would think about buying Photoshop again just because I don't need it. What's the point?
But what about the online thing, Photopea or
I don't
whatever
want
it
any.
is?
Yeah, that's
I
what I was
don't
about to
care.
mention just now.
Online clone. I
Adobe
think it's
stock.
open source, right? It's
don't know
just
if
like
it's
a
open source.
GitHub.io page.
It might be.
I could be mistaken. I'd have to look into it.
But the fact it's a copy of like Photoshop made
Yeah,
by one guy hosted online.
Not a copy, right? Legally, it's not a
Legally
copy.
distinct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he recreated all of it himself, like
Right.
a lot of similar functionalities. You can clearly tell it's Photoshop inspired.
Yeah.
So
That's
Yeah,
true.
I mean the logo is Photoshop inspired, isn't it? Like photo, I don't know. It's like PP or something with the blue outline and the dark gray background. It's the same thing. Yeah,
I mean, open source
It just
software
runs in
can
your
do
web
a lot
browser.
for you.
yeah. I
I
mean,
love it.
okay. So then here's the question, right?
What?
Do you use .docx or .doc, or have you converted to .odf?
I actually don't make documents anymore. I almost exclusively use OpenOffice to open existing documents that I made with Microsoft Office.
Fair enough.
These days, I rarely use Office Online.
So then where do you create documents? Pen and paper, or?
I guess creating documents isn't something I really do that frequently. I typically do it at work, and at work we have our Office licenses, so that's what I use. But I'm trying to think of the last time I made a document for anything. I guess I'll make
You don't need
spreadsheets.
a spreadsheet for when you're playing Factorio?
A what? No. Well, for one thing, I don't have Factorio yet because after all these years, it still hasn't gone on sale.
It
and
will
I'm
never
too
go on
stingy.
sale.
Yeah,
I'm
it's
just
always
talking
gonna be
about how I only
$30.
use free
it's
software.
$35 now. They increased the
$35.
price due to inflation.
Oh,
What?
man. So the price has only gone up since I said I'm holding out for a sale. So
Yeah,
that shows
it
how
has
likely
literally never gone on
Oh,
sale. It's the
man.
one Steam game, or one of the Steam games, that
Yeah.
will never go on sale
They're
and has never
steadfast.
go on sale. The best time to buy it was yesterday.
Okay, that's
So
fair.
go home and buy Factorio.
Well, I'll think about it, but for now, I'll continue to use
He'll
my
think
free
about
software.
it. It'll go up to $45,
Yeah, it
and
really
then he'll
will.
realize that it's not worth it. Yeah, I don't know.
One thing about open source versus paid software is that with paid software, the companies that get the money use some of the money in advertising, which lets people know about said software.
That makes sense.
Like I've played
Yeah,
very
that's
few,
true.
for example, like open source video games. I bet they exist,
Great
but
point.
like I don't know what they are or
Is
haven't used
Dwarf
them.
Fortress open source? Maybe like whatever the command line, like ASCII art dwarf game thing. It's like an RPG. I don't actually know. It might not be.
But I feel like all the open source games are like little tiny games.
Yeah.
You know?
They
Indie.
are.
But
Yeah.
you'd feel like that there's should be grand, like amazing giant, because like there's so many developers that all contribute to the open source community.
Oh, when you
It'd
think
do
about
the same thing
cost.
for video games? Question mark.
I feel like a game is much more complex than a small piece of software, though, right?
I guess when you
But,
have
like,
a
even if it's
game,
open,
depends.
like you have Blender, right?
Yeah.
Blender's this huge piece of like monolithic software that's kind of dwarfed the alternatives that were like paid in that industry.
But how
That's
many
true.
people need access to 3D modeling software versus some random video game that you're very excited about?
I would bet there's more people using Blender than play most video games.
I believe
Right,
that.
exactly. So the community is much larger. There's more people who want to contribute to that and find value
Because
in
they get like
contributing to that.
actual stuff out of it
Right.
versus just
Versus,
entertainment.
I don't know, what's the push to contribute to an open source video game? I mean, I guess you add your own levels to it, but you already do that through Steam.
It requires
Otherwise,
so
it's
much
just open
existing
source.
framework already.
Right, and there's a lot of framework. There's
Would you consider like I guess that's a great point actually is like the levels that are made by people on the Steam store, would you consider those open source, quote unquote?
right. How about
It depends
Oh,
on the-
yeah.
how about the game engine alone? Is
Maybe.
the game engine open source?
Yeah, normally it runs either in Unity or the other
Unreal.
Unreal, right.
And are either of those open source? I don't think
Neither
they
of those are open source, but they're free.
That is true.
For as long as you make less like as long as you make like less than $1 million per year.
Sure.
So.
I forget what is Gary's mod made in?
Source.
Oh wow, yeah.
Right, because it was originally a Half-Life mod or something, and then
Right.
it became its own distinct game, I thought. Because
Over my head.
Half-Life was then a mod for a different game that came before it, and then Valve put a bunch of effort into that, if I'm not mistaken. And then Gary's mod continued that trend, I think, by being a mod of Half-Life and then coming to its own game as well. I don't remember what the original game was, though. I can't for the life of me.
It reminds me of like Counter-Strike 2. Like
Oh, yeah, because CS was originally a mod of
yeah, Counter-Strike 1.
Half-Life
my
or another game.
Mm.
Yeah. And then it got
CS2 is
ported to
when they-
Source with CS Source, I think. And then CSGO was the conversion to, I don't know, whatever. It's the modernization of CS Source.
But all of that work though was a game development studio modifying the game, right? So it's kind of like pretty closed. in
I
that
think
respect,
some
right?
of it was individual hobbyists.
Were there community
modifying
modders?
the game.
Yeah, I remember, like, there
I think
was-
Gary's mod was, it was a
Quake.
mod of Quake.
It was a mod of Quake.
Oh.
Yeah.
Interesting. But there's like all these like 16-year-olds that were like
Yeah.
making these legendary levels, and that's what Dust 2 is. Or
Huh.
Dust
Yeah.
11 question
Back
mark.
in the day when you actually could modify things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, nowadays, if you try to do what they used to do back in the day, you'd be able to modify the stuff. I mean, the company's going to slap you with $1 million lawsuit, and you will be in debt for the rest of your life.
Nintendo.
Nintendo.
Oh yeah. Well, even with like anti-cheat, isn't it so hard to modify game files these days that you'll just get like a VAC ban if you try to
It's
go
it's
too far
doable,
away
but
from
you'll
the main-
immediately be banned.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
some games though that purposely integrate with like the Steam Workshop. So
That's
they-
true. Yeah,
There
I
are
guess
some,
Workshop
yeah.
is the closest we get to open source. I guess I would consider that somewhat open source, right? It's community driven.
Do you get the
community
source
driven
files
is more
though? I don't
accurate.
know
Yeah, that's true. I
how
guess
many of that
strictly.
builds or what that.
Quite a few of them
workflow looks
probably
like.
are open source though. I bet they
Yeah.
have like
That's probably
GitHub's
true.
like GitHub links inside of their Steam page somewhere.
That's probably a good distinction though, because when you think about community driven, that's sort of what the ultimate driving force of open source software is, right? Because it's
Yeah,
like
it's
if
the
you
community.
use Blender, say, and you like keep encountering this problem that's kind of annoying, but it's like, oh, you go onto the forums and everyone's like, yeah, that's just how it works. If you're a developer, you can just make a fork and fix it and, put in a pull request or whatever and hope that it goes back into the mainline branch. And if enough people are with you on that, I mean, you're going to solve a lot of people's problems they might not know they have, which is kind of beautiful because you don't have to ask anyone's permission. You don't have to like work for a company to do it. You can just fix problems that you see and push them into the mainline branch. So that's kind of beautiful to me.
It's one of the best attributes of open source software.
Right.
It's the fact that everyone can fix bugs and everyone has access to it. Everyone can audit it and see if there are issues and then fix those issues. It means that your own developers, if you're a company or whatever, don't have to spend all the time fixing it.
Right.
They just receive a message, hey, by the way, we fixed this bug. Here's the details. Here's the information. Here's the code. And you just look at the diff and you see, oh, yeah, that makes sense. That looks good. You maybe run some tests. Hopefully you have actual unit testing and some CI/CD pipeline set up to
Good
just
luck
test
in a lot
it.
of open source projects.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, some of them have it.
Some of them do. Some of them do.
KiCad's got full pipeline set up to make sure that pull requests look good before it even touches a human, which is interesting. But yeah, then you merge their changes and it benefits everyone.
The other thing that's really nice about it is that suppose that I make a project open source, right?
Mhm.
And a bunch of people start using it. You guys contribute, issue pull requests. I merge them in. I'm going. I get a little burnt out. I don't like the fact that I'm maintaining this monolithic
Right.
piece of software that so many people are using. So I like make a little post saying like I'm done. Anyone else can fork any repo at any time
Mhm.
and continue the development from there.
Yeah, or you can even add other people as maintainers to the repository where you still retain control over it and then add some other people who have the ability to make pushes and pull requests and review and.
But even if I'm malicious,
on
like
it.
there's still workarounds.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Depending on license too, like
Sure.
GPL3, right? Make sure that it's.
Yeah, let's talk about like
Really
licenses and
open
open source
source.
a little bit, because like there's what is open source by definition?
Or just that the source code
the
is
source
available.
code is available, right?
Well, it's not just that the source code is available, I don't think, but I think it's also that the license is permissive.
That's true. I guess it really does depend on the license. I only just recently learned about licensing.
But if Microsoft just randomly made all of their code like open and available, but you weren't allowed to use it for any commercial purposes, you weren't allowed to modify it yourself, they would come and hunt you down and sue you out of oblivion.
So that's
Is that
basically
open
copy
source?
left. So that's something I just recently learned about. For being as vague as possible at work, we use some open source software components, like a lot of people use in the industry use open source software components. And there are two main ways you can look at open source, and that's copy left and then the free open source, like unrestricted, permissible, like you mentioned. So with copy left, the idea is that you have your source code available that you can modify to your heart's content. You can do whatever you want with it, but you are not allowed to sell it, and you're not allowed to remove the original license. You can't modify the original license. So basically what that means is you are forced to keep that code open source forever and keep it under the same license, which is really nice for the open source community. You know, people are allowed to keep a license in perpetuity, and they make their modifications as they want, but you can't ever sell it. You can't like make software better, but then put it behind a paywall. You are forced to always keep these components accessible. But sometimes that means if you're trying to sell a product with open source software components in it, you're going to be restricted, which I've noticed is sort of a problem from a capitalist standpoint. There's so many great open source components, but you're very restricted on how you can use them if you ever sell your products, even if you're just distributing software that includes GPL components. You might notice something I learned recently, like my Blu-ray player. In the settings, there's a section licensing, and it shows all of the GPL components in there and their license, which you legally have to do. And people get sued to oblivion if you don't. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars in lawsuits if you don't include that.
Oftentimes there's a couple of ways around it.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting. So like in a copyleft license, right, I can't like take a component, put it in my software and just pass it off as my own.
Right.
But let's suppose I don't want to like either some of them it's like, oh, just give us credit. Other ones it's like you have to, if you include this in your software, you have to make your software also copyleft.
Right.
But I don't want to give my software away for free, right?
Right.
So instead what I do is I make a little microservice that exists with like an API, and I run that up, and the code that I use to make it into a service, I make copyleft and I open source it, and bam, now I have a server running that runs the copyleft software as an API.
Yes.
Then in my program, I just want to use this API, and now you don't have to adhere quote unquote to that
That's
copyleft
right.
license.
Yes, so basically if you have
Shenanigans.
GPL software components in your system, if you do not modify them at all and you keep them completely separate, you don't distribute them as part of whatever it is you're selling or distributing, but you use them, you interface with them, you can still distribute it and sell it. But you do have to still have the licenses and everything listed. So that's kind of the closest you can get away to skirting around the licensing requirements.
I'm pretty sure some of the newer GPL licenses have something written in it to try to prevent people from doing
yeah.
API-ness, server-ness of
Yeah.
workaround.
It really depends on how you're using the components. So that's something, and especially with a company like us, that's where we have to bring in legal. We have to bring in like platforms engineers to ask about this sort of thing because it's hard for us to know. I mean, licensing is legal. It's hard to read. It's almost obscure on purpose so that, people don't try to play with the rules at all.
Do you know what the most common open source licenses are?
I have to imagine
Most
it's GPL3 or MIT.
Yeah.
It's probably MIT followed by GPL3, but I could be mistaken.
And I think the one more, which is Apache 2.0.
Apache 2.0.
Oh,
is
really? I
also
would have
in
guessed
there.
GPL2 just because it's the older, more common in my experience.
Isn't GPL3 still from like 2009 though? I think it's
I don't know.
fairly old.
I think they made some changes because like with GPL2, one of the other things you have to do is you have to have the source code available. But what that meant in 2004 or 5 or whatever was that you could literally like mail a CD with your source code to someone. And they were like, well, now I think with GPL3, the restriction is now like you have to have the free open source software source code available on a website for at least 3 years or something. They're not requiring it to be forever, but generally that's the idea is that you need to make the source code available, but it doesn't have to be on physical media.
I haven't looked into it that much. I thought it was just that you had to make it available in some form. You were allowed to charge a reasonable fee for access to it, be that to make a CD and mail it, or print it out on paper and send it, or whatever maliciously.
Here's a 5,000-page document with our source code. Good luck.
Right, exactly. Sort of thing you want to do with it. But you just had to make it available. And you didn't even have to make it publicly available or anything. You just had to make it available upon request.
Right. And what I've noticed now is even like Sony, TP-Link, a lot of big companies do use GPL software, and you can go on their websites right now and find source code for their hardware. And you legally have to be allowed through the GPL license to know how to distribute it and like deploy it onto the device. So you can modify it yourself and do whatever you want, which I think is cool.
Great.
It's very cool, but it means for the software developers, there's a lot of extra work involved with GPL software, which can be a problem. And sometimes if you're in a kind of tight development schedule, that might just mean GPL software is not reasonably a path forward, which kind of is unfortunate sometimes because GPL components can be beautiful. But
I think though that like there have been some cases where companies see, oh, it would take us a long time to redevelop this whole like software package ourselves, so we're just going to use this GPL thing. And you know what? We are going to make our software GPL as well. And as a result, more and more. If only. But if only true for a lot of companies.
Makes software better though.
I totally agree. I think that one of the number one reasons why like people, for example, always say technology moves so quickly, right? It advances so fast. Why is that? I think one of the biggest contributors is because of open source.
Yeah.
If you right now wanted to make your own company, your own like little IT tech startup in some way, shape, or form, you have such a huge like base to stand on. These giants you can stand on the shoulders of because of these open source projects. You go through, you find whatever it is you're trying to do, you find open source projects to do, different chunks of what you're trying to do, include them, and then bam, you now have made a contribution to open source stuff, but then you can use it also.
Right.
To, offer said service for people to actually solve a problem.
And from my own experience, just from like personal projects and everything, I use so much open source software all the time. Like it's something like my first time using a new development platform, say it's like a TI chip or something like that, and I don't know how to use an I2C, routine. Maybe I need an 8-bit read command. There's something online. Somebody's probably already done that, and you can just find it. And that's the beauty of open source. I don't have to write it all from scratch. I don't have to go into the 1,500-page manual and find which buffer and register I have to write to. It's just somebody already wrote it, and you could just make it work.
That's actually a question I had for you. Is like you mentioned using open source software inside of like your own like personal software like frameworks. You have like your own website, I think, also.
Oh yeah, I do have my own website. So it's been a little bit of a mess. My website started in 2010, 2011. My very first server, my web server, was my brother's old Dell Inspiron 1545 laptop.
Heck yeah.
He broke the screen on it, and even though my parents were kind of pissed, it was whatever. And my brother's a great gift giver. So for Christmas, he gave me his broken laptop, and honestly, it was a great gift.
That's a fantastic gift.
Yes. So I had our old family PC, which had been obsolete for several years already. We had a CRT compact, big, monitor, this huge tube TV, basically. And I hooked that up to the laptop so I could get video output because it had VGA. That's it. And
fancy stuff.
Yeah. It took up a lot of desk space. But I basically just kept it on all the time and was able to, in Windows, it still had Windows 7 32-bit home premium. I basically
That's
just
good stuff right there.
Yeah. Turned off the firewall, opened up all the ports, and started running software on it that I could, use like a mail server, SSH, web server.
I'm sure at the time, though, you didn't really know a whole lot about this.
No,
so,
not at all.
Well, he just said he turned off the firewall and opened up all the ports.
Right.
Well, yeah, that's basically what I do now. So I did find, I don't know for a fact if this was open source software, but there was a free panel application, like a web stack called zPanel, which I don't even know if it's still around, but it's kind of like cPanel, which is a paid version of the same thing. Basically, it's a stack, and what that means in this context is that there's a mail server, so you can have your own email address on your domain.
I got to go download that so I can get my email set up.
Well, if you're using a Windows PC to host a web server, yeah,
someone's
go
probably
for
ported it. It's fine. Run it through Wine.
It has mail. It has databases, so you can have your SQL databases and everything. It's got a web server. It came with Apache. Usually, you'll hear these stacks like XAMPP or something like that.
XAMPP, yeah, that's when I first learned on.
Yeah. So that's just a generic term. It stands for like whatever it is. Is it XML? I don't even know. Apache M is the mail server. Whatever. Basically, it's all the services you need for a web server. And I started hosting my website based off basically some templates I found online, HTML templates, and wrote it all in Scratch. The P stands for PHP, which is like the dynamic content on the website.
Oh, I got it. So X stands for cross-platform.
Okay, weird.
A stands for Apache. M stands for MySQL. P stands for PHP.
Yep.
And P stands for Perl.
Oh God, it's PHP.
Perl. Oh
It is
man, I
PHP.
did never use Perl, but I did have some Perl experience later on. But yeah, PHP was everything I used. PHP, of course, stands for PHP Hypertext Processor.
Did you say you wrote this in Scratch, like the online coding?
No. I built it from scratch. Oh, I mean, to this
He
day,
wrote it in Scratch. The drag and drop. Yeah.
yeah,
Interface,
I just had some garbage and I decided to make it useful again by making it into a web server. I used that thing for maybe 3 or 4 years until I finally actually built a server. I mean, just a desktop tower PC.
How did you make a website / out of that though? Like, did you like follow a book? Did you watch like a YouTube tutorial? Like, YouTube was not great, like booming at the time like it is today.
Oh,
You
it
could
definitely was. Believe me, I was on YouTube nonstop back in the day. I've been using YouTube, honestly, like religiously for maybe 12, 15 years, something like that.
So
But,
can
like,
we
the
start
early-
a YouTube religion?
I wouldn't
Only
do
takes
that.
6 people to believe in it.
Is that the minimum requirement?
Sorry, that's legally the requirement to start a religion. You have to have
All right,
6
so
people
casual
believe in
religion.
it.
We need a couple more people. To get...
We can indoctrinate a few of your friends. It's fine.
But there's always been a host of resources on like how to learn this stuff online.
So you used YouTube primarily to like
well,
learn how to make your
I
own
wouldn't
website?
say just YouTube, but the internet, 100%. Everything I learned was self-taught from the internet, and
Google Stack Overflow at the time.
I mean,
Oh,
everything
Stack
I'm
Overflow has
taught-
been in my back pocket since day one, basically. I mean, just finding, anytime I have a problem, oh, PHP doesn't render this right. Oh, you're using the wrong version. Here, update this. Update it, it works. It's just like following steps someone else already did. Now, of course, we have GPT, which helps a heck of a lot more than it did before because you can type in your specific problem and get an answer back. But following guides online, that's really all it was. And it's still been running strong. It's changed domain names a couple of times for a host of reasons, but I still have my website based on the original one. I'll say it's at least inspired by the original after all these years. So almost 13 years.
So what is like you're going through the stack, not from XAMPP, but from your one, which is called what again?
Well, that was just the panel application. So Z-panel.
Z-panel.
The idea with the panel is that it kind of builds in a lot of tools for you, all based on the web framework. So it'll like install phpMyAdmin for you. And it installs the database itself. So not only now do you have a database program running that's listening for requests as a service in the background, you also have a web panel that you can just log into on your browser, and then you can access a front-end management software for your database. So phpMyAdmin I've used for a long, long time. It's just built in PHP, and it lets you log into your database and then see it in like an Excel, like a table, spreadsheet kind of view, as opposed to just doing it all from the command line like you would with just the service.
And what was like the front end portion? Was it literally HTML, CSS, and JavaScript that you wrote?
I wish it was JavaScript. I love JavaScript now, but no, it was all PHP. It was PHP and HTML and CSS.
Well, so it was like server side rendered.
It was all server side, and it was very clunky. It still is. It's still written in PHP. I have moved towards different JavaScript front ends now at this point, but PHP was what powers it to this day. All my logins and everything, database.
I thought that you meant like that's just as like the API layer that you use as like.
I mean, so this is what I've noticed. You can really choose from a web development perspective if you want to have front end doing all the work or back end doing all the work. Basically, what that means is if your smarts are on the client side, the browser, the user who's on your website, if their browser is actually running all of the code on your website that does stuff, or if it's all happening on the server. And with PHP, it's all on the server. So you click a button and that sends a request to the server, which then processes it and then updates the page and then gives it back to you. It did everything I needed. So I just went with that. And it's not beautiful. It's not elegant. It's slow because it was, hosted on a crappy old laptop sitting in my bedroom that was on our ISP at the upload speed, whatever we were limited to. I mean,
What was your like initial view? Like, why did you go, I need a website?
that's a great question. Well, for one thing, I wanted to get around the school's firewall. So what I would do was...
Did you rehost stuff on your website so that you could go and hit your own website?
I didn't quite
gotta play Agar.io or whatever.
Yeah. I didn't quite get to the point where I used my service as an SSH tunnel. I wish I knew how to back in the day because that would have made things a lot easier. I could just set up a proxy and do it on my computer at the school. But I actually set up TeamViewer back before it was a security nightmare, before they were compromised. But TeamViewer, if you don't know, I'm sure is a dead application now. Lets you remotely log into another.
People still use it.
People still use
I know
it.
they
It's
do, and
not
they
dead.
shouldn't. They shouldn't. They really
What should
shouldn't.
they use instead?
I don't have a suggestion for an alternative. I would never
VNC
install it.
and a secure
Okay.
SSH shell probably.
That's
or
I
fair.
believe
some
you can
SSH
actually
tunnel.
control through Microsoft Teams now too.
You can
Oh, yeah, that's true. I
You
guess-
have to
well, you have
start
to
a
answer the call,
right? You have to
right?
answer the call, and
Yeah.
So I wouldn't count that. I mean, you
or
want something
RDP.
autonomous.
RDP is another option.
Right.
RDP if you're on Windows systems,
Right.
yeah.
So with Windows, it was most convenient for me to basically just run it all the time. I'd have TeamViewer server on my server running all the time, or whatever the client, the appropriate.
Do you have to pay for the version that you don't
Nope.
accept?
No, it was free.
Really?
Yeah,
Yes.
it used to be free. I think.
Wow, okay.
Was it? Okay. Again, this is back
Or
like
it's
2013,
free
14.
it's free for
personal
personal
use.
use.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was free for personal use, but also they made you like hit accept on both sides still.
Okay. I never had that problem.
I don't
Oh, okay.
remember that, to be honest. I mean, I used
I could have
it.
been using it wrong too.
I
Yeah.
do remember that.
Okay.
You could
I
set
actually
it up.
way
remember that
old.
whenever I
Like you
used
could
it.
set it up to accept a password. So you would key in like a username and you would have a password. And
Yeah.
with that password, it would auto accept and let you just log right into the system.
At least back in the day, I was able to configure it to remotely get in all the time. And I just had to this day, I actually still have a flash drive on my keys with portable apps on it. And TeamViewer was one of the portable apps I had on it. So I'd log into the school computer. It's all locked down. You can't download or install anything. I'd put in my 8 gig flash drive. I had Assault Cube. I could play like FPSs at school. I had, Minecraft. I had all the stuff that was on my flash drive. And one of them was TeamViewer. So I could log into my home server. No firewall there. Anything I needed that was blocked at the school's firewall, I just get around it at home. It was great. And then the other thing that I always thought was so funny, they say, if you need to save this document, go on ahead and just email it to yourself on your school email. And I'm like, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to upload it with FTP to my home server, and then it's available from anywhere in the world. I have my flash drive in my pocket. I could go to the airport kiosk and download it there. It was amazing. You just had everything you needed. It was my universal hub, and it still is. I use my web server all the time.
Nice.
I love it.
So what about the personal website portion though?
Okay, that was mostly just for fun. Honestly, it doesn't do
It's
anything.
very important for his resume. It's part of the resume.
Honestly,
header.
it is.
Yeah,
It
have
really
my own
is.
website.
Showing off
yeah,
that I
yeah,
had the
yeah.
experience has really helped, I think. But
Especially at that time. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a resume builder,
Yeah,
right?
people-
I don't know.
I mean, they look at my website when I show it off. I always put it on, I sign all my emails with my website domain name. And to every interview I've ever been, I'm like, look at my website. And one thing I love is that when I show off my website to people, I'm like, ooh, make an account. I've got almost 50 registered users on my account. And the first question they always ask, what can I do? I'm like,
Nothing.
Yeah, you can't really do anything, but maybe someday. And I still haven't built anything. There's so many parts of my website that are like, maybe I'll finish this later, and it's dated like 2015. Like, it's just never happened, but maybe someday.
When like making your own mail server that's like attached in that system, right?
Mhm.
I'm always afraid of like my own mail server going down and then I miss a ton of like really important
Right.
emails and stuff.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any issues with?
So HMail server was what they suggested for Windows. It's a mail server you can run on there, and it works fine. I never used it because here's the problem. As soon as your email address goes on the internet as whatever it is, on your domain name registration, all you get is spam. You just get so much spam. And I would get so flooded by spam that I was just like, I'm never going to use this email. So I probably still have a mail server running with probably at this point hundreds of thousands of emails that I'll never log in. I'll never check because it's just spam. But
Okay,
you
so
can
it's not
do
like an
it.
email that you use, it just is functional.
It does work.
Hey,
yeah.
it's a garbage email.
Yeah.
Garbage email. that's
Yeah,
right.
right.
But I don't
You
even
have unlimited
use it.
garbage emails.
Well, yeah, but you're also unlimited on Gmail. So I just have like 5 Gmail accounts for different tiers of
But
spam.
the act of making a Gmail is kind of frustrating.
No, it's not.
Is
Are
it?
you aware of Gmail Plus addresses?
Yes, I
Okay,
use those
yes,
all the
you
time.
Put in
True.
your Gmail and you plus and you tag it with something.
So anytime I sign up for a service
Although
and I put
some
a plus
people,
in,
yeah, some places don't accept the plus.
if they say it's an invalid email address, I do not give them my email because I don't trust anyone who says you're not allowed to use pluses in your email address because all that tells me is they want to spam you, not somebody else, you. They want spam going to your account. And
But you can just give them your Z-panel email.
Yeah, I just give them a different spam email. I have a
10-minute
Gmail.
mail.
I have that's what I'm saying. It's not, you can just get a Gmail account. Why not? Just sign up for it, put all your spam there.
Right, but then like you don't know what company or what website you put your email in that caused the spam.
Yeah, I don't care though. It's a spam
Okay.
email.
That's fair.
I just kind of use it. If someone says they sent me an email and check my inbox, I open it up, I ignore all the other junk, and then I click this is my email, and then I never go back to it again.
That's fair. That's
It's
fair.
pretty convenient.
But then when you're going to sign back into something like
Yes.
4, 5, 8 years later,
Mm-hmm.
how do you remember which of your 5 emails that you used?
You're gonna hate me for this, but it's because I save all my passwords in Gmail in Google. So like every time I log on to a website, if I don't have a saved password for it, I just guess. I have like a couple of emails, couple passwords. If I can't get in, I'll just give up. Sometimes, forgot my username, forgot my password. Those help.
But like in order to like forget your username, you have to know what email to type
Right.
in. to
So
send
I'll
it
just
to.
type it in. They'll say it doesn't exist.
You'll type in like all 5.
I rarely get to this point. I do have a pretty good memory for these sort of things, but I rarely get to the point where I actually have to go through and be like, oh, I don't remember my username. I don't know my password, and go through and I'll try 5, 6, 7 email addresses, and if I don't get it, I'll just make a new account.
It sounds to me like you really need a password manager, by the way.
No, I don't. I do
Not
just
like a
fine
real
managing them on
password
my own.
manager that's not Google Chrome.
Works fine for me.
The first stage is acceptance, Alex.
It's not a need I think I have.
knowing you have a problem.
Nope.
You know what?
Usually,
That's fine.
I said
usually
it's fine.
acknowledging
I guess
it is the hardest step.
That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Acknowledgement is the hardest step.
Well, maybe it'll happen someday, but don't hold your breath.
I guess it's his problem for when his browser gets compromised and suddenly all of his passwords are gone.
I'll have you know I currently have 4 compromised passwords, but I don't care.
That's fair.
Don't we all have compromised passwords, though?
It just depends on how much you value your accounts.
Yeah, right. How much do I value this random Minecraft server account that I made years
Yeah.
ago?
My
Can
bank
I
accounts are
really be
locked
asked
down.
to
My
go and close
emails are
it down
locked
and
down.
change it.
Yeah.
So in terms of like, if I were to sign up for your like email and me trying to do something, I couldn't do much. But what did you have your website do?
What do you mean?
I mean, like a website normally is used to convey some form of information.
Was
What
it ever?
information
I mean,
did
it was
you try
kind
to
of
convey?
just like a resume. It showed my now. I mean, I did rebuild it a little bit ago. I showed off like, here are my projects. Here's the stuff that I do. Contact me. But even my contact form
okay,
is
so it's like a
mostly
personal
spam.
like resume website.
Yeah, it's just a personal website. It doesn't do anything.
Sign up to my mailing list.
Most of the pages are non-functional or placeholders, which I think is hilarious because they've been there for
We'll
so
get back
long.
to you at our earliest convenience.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is never, yeah.
Your call is important to us. That's what my website is.
Your call is important to us. Please stay on the website.
But
we
if-
need them numbers up.
But if I were to summarize, it's because I wanted to learn how to do it, and I did. I think I did a really good job of learning how to use a web stack just by playing around with old junk. It didn't cost me anything. I never paid to host it. I never
You must
paid.
have spent so many hours just like learning and trying to tinker when
It
you
was a
were
long
first starting.
time. Yeah.
Because like I've noticed if I have like a base of like someone who knows it, just like sitting down with me for like 20 minutes and telling me, here's the fundamentals that you know of like what to even search, right? Like you have so many unknown unknowns at the beginning. If you have like
Yeah.
at least some unknowns, then that gives you a good base to go off of now.
Right.
So like if for example you were to get in a call right now with your past self, right when you were first
Yeah.
starting, what advice would you give what advice would you give yourself?
Just to wipe the Windows partition and move right to Linux early on so that I could host everything on Linux and not deal with Windows. Having a Windows server is a mess. Don't ever get a Windows server. Just do Linux.
Hell yeah, this guy knows what's up.
Because it's open source.
Yeah.
Well, that's the story of my website. I still use it even though it's junk, but I like making stuff out of junk. You know, it's repurposing old crap.
True.
I think
Now
we
we
need
just-
to do more of that.
Now we'll just
Yeah, you're not wrong there.
automate that with AI.
Now we're
new
talking. We'll get AI to do it all for me.
It's the AI trash collector.
True. I brought up AI. We should end the podcast here soon.
Hey,
You'll
Alexa,
You'll hear more
Alexa,
about
play
it.
Despacito.
Oh, no.
Thank you everyone for
Sorry
watching
for
the
that.
Casual Coders podcast.
Season
not.
2.
Season 2. Here we
Yeah!
go.
Catch you in the next one.